How good, Lord, to be here. Your glory fills the night. Your face and garments like the sun shine with unborrowed light. How good, Lord, to be here. Your beauty to behold. Where Moses and Elijah stand, your messengers of old. Unfortunately, your hymnal does not include my favorite Transfiguration hymn, which quotes those disciples, Peter, the impetuous, "How good, Lord, that we are here." So has there been a mountaintop in your life? Okay, that's a silly question in Vermont, isn't it? I've been hearing talk of skiing and cross country. And even if you're not a hiker or a skier, as I am not anymore, you still get to look up to the mountains from which, as the psalmist said, our help cometh. A mountaintop experience doesn't have to happen on a mountain. It's an experience where suddenly we are confronted with the immensity of being, a sense of connectedness beyond ourselves. For the disciples, it was seeing John with the epitomes of the Hebrew faith, Moses and Elijah representing the prophets. He was transfigured. We're not quite sure all the time what that means. Scientifically, maybe the sun just shone on him so brightly that they were blinded and saw everything in white. If you don't wear goggles, you might have that experience. Have you had a mountaintop experience? When I was doing campus ministry in Indianapolis, my predecessor had been invited to give a lecture each year to a required course on wellness about spirituality. And I found a wonderful entry into this discussion, which was called spiritual entry points. Those moments when we feel that connection beyond ourselves, as if nothing could be more perfect. Think about the experience of giving birth after the labor. I know a few of you have had that experience. The struggle, the labor pangs, and then that miracle of the first cry. I haven't had children, but I'll tell you, every time I watch Call the Midwife, verklempt. Or being on a mountain and suddenly seeing a vast horizon far beyond what we can see from down here. Perhaps seeing comets across the sky. Or have any of you been out to see the 8 planets that were lined up? Or was it just too cloudy up here too? I know, we in Vermont miss out on a lot thanks to the clouds, don't we? At least we got the eclipse in April. And there was reports of people suddenly shutting up in awe. And then applauding as the sun returned. That sense that there's something greater than ourselves, and we are part of it. One of the entries into spirituality can be performing an art. Quite often, if you ask an artist, a musician, let's say, how they think they did, they will go completely blank because they were so caught up in the awesomeness of producing their music that they didn't notice extraneous things like a few missed notes. I saw one young violinist in a series of concerts, free concerts at the Episcopal Cathedral in Burlington. It was a special recital for young artists. And Henry Wu was playing his violin solo. I don't remember the piece. But just as he started, a group of people from the senior residents across the street started entering, half of them with walkers that were clacking along the floor. I thought, oh, how awful, what distraction. But later, when I commended Henry for being able to play through it, he said, "What are you talking about? What are you talking about?" Yes, or a dancer, or even a painter who gets so lost in their painting that at some point they stand back and wonder, how did I do that? Awe, mountaintop. I have a few stories of my own. A very nutshell version is almost 50 years ago. I was a graduate student, my first year at Harvard Divinity School. Yeah, I'm that old. And for a weekend, a group of women and 2 children went up to a borrowed cabin. One of our members knew the family, and they let us use it for the weekend. We all got there Friday night, did dinner, spent all day Saturday enjoying hiking farther up the hill, enjoyed just chatting with each other, just being away from the city. Well, most of them had responsibilities on Sunday morning. After all, it was a divinity school. There were only 3 adults left Saturday night and the 2 children. Well, the children conked out quickly. The 3 of us mulled some wine. We turned on the fire. No, you don't just turn on a fire. We had to work at that. And it was set in such a place that we could look out the plate glass windows. This was a rustic cabin except for those plate glass windows, looking out over miles and miles of trees and hills, with only the occasional plane in the distance to tell us we had anything to do with civilization. We put on a record. They had quite a collection of LPs back then. And we chose Ralph Vaughan Williams' Fantasia on green sleeves. Reverse side, the Fantasia on a Theme by Thomas Callan. Tallis. We just sat there, sipping our wine, listening to that LP over and over, other than having to do the flip, and enjoying seeing nothing out there except God's world. There was something so magical about it that when I went back down to my student life, it seemed almost bearable again. I'm sure you can think of mountaintops in your own life, and not just for skiing. Those moments. Anthropology teaches us that most religions start because people have had a numinous experience, and they want to share it. They want to capture it. And so rituals evolve. Rituals that over time teach the younger generation who have not had that exact experience, but somehow get drawn into it through their elders. Sometimes the ritual gets rather stale. As a kid, I thought Lutherans were really boring. Same thing every week. Yet as an adult, some of those pieces of liturgy come back to me and feed me in amazing ways. Many young people today don't find the ritual of church membership meaningful. It's great to see so many younger adults today, as well as the little ones who are too young to know what the word blessing means but receive it. We often ritualize and have to struggle to make it keep going. Now, I don't know if your choir's this good every week, or if you start to take it for granted and it just doesn't seem so special. I went back to that cabin a year later because I was working in the church whose parishioners included the family who owned it. I was working with the junior high youth group. And of course, being New Englanders, they had an annual ski weekend. Probably 8 youth, 3 adults. after a day of skiing, and I think it was the last day I ever went downhill skiing, because I was certainly not good enough to go up higher on the mountain, and on the lower slope, I kept getting run into by people who knew even less than I did. At the end of that day, the kids were wiped out. They were all in bed early. We had some wine, so I mulled it. We had a fire. I put on that record, ready to have that experience again. But the other adults were kind of like, well, it's been a long day. I think I'll go to bed. I couldn't recreate that awesomeness by my own volition. The Spirit just wasn't there. I had been to heaven once, but it wasn't back there at the same time. A wonderful theologian who died 2 years ago, Calvin Butts, said that the work of the church is to take people to heaven and take them down to see what needs to be done. Some churches work very hard for an emotional experience. Others provide a more quiet spirituality. But often there are people who just want to come to church to escape everything else for a little while and then go back to business as usual. The Transfiguration story tells us, if nothing else, we can't stay on those mountaintop experiences. We can relish them and remember them and then take them home again. I used to attend a conference regularly at a wonderful church camp called Kirkridge. Have any of you been there? It's on a mountainside, of course, up and down a hill in the middle of the Poconos of eastern Pennsylvania. I went a number of times. And after the last time, I wrote a poem that started, "Once again I have been to the mountain, grabbed a vision, taken it home." Not needing to go back to the mountain anymore, because what I had gained there had become part of me. I hope that you have that experience of feeling connected to heaven through religious practice, through spirituality, which too often isn't as visible in the church as we know it's there. We go back to the valley where there's work to be done. Our own day-to-day living is sometimes enough. For others, it's about helping a neighbor. Sometimes it's about getting involved in local, state, or national politics. God calls us to be involved in the world, not to escape from it. And finding what our calling is lifelong discernment. Yes, they couldn't build a shrine up on that mountainside. They had to come back down, as do we. Before we taste of death, we see your kingdom come. We long to behold the vision bright and make this hill our home. How good, Lord, to be here, yet we may not remain. But since you bid us leave the mount, come with us to the plain. Amen.